I think we're on track in finishing US in the Caribbean in March, uh, because you realize that from we reach back at school, we haven't had, we call it now, I've had classes every single session with you face to face. But when you return after your exam break and all of these different stuff, then I will start to give you some uh, work on it. All right. Thank you very much, husband. All right. So today we are going to look at the Cuban independence wars and the United States. So in other words, what we're going to do for today's class, we're going to look at what led or what are the different things that would have happened to for the Cubans to gain their independence, right? And so from the outset, I'm going to tell you that the Cubans would have fought two wars in order to get from their independence from Spain. And we're going to look at how the US got involved in this war and the US interest in Cuba, why the US was interested in Cuba. These are some of the things that we're going to look at, right? So the first thing, I know you know where Cuba is, but just to be safe in the exam, if they should ask you which island is this, everybody should know that Cuba is located right here. It is not too far from Florida. So if you look, you can see Florida, which is here, the United States. The host phone is ringing. All right. The so so this is the United States, which is right here. Miami is right here, and also Tampa. Most of them should know. Most I don't think a lot of Jamaicans know Tampa, which is here. But
Yes, sir.
mostly, huh?
Sir, I was saying I know Tampa.
You know Tampa, but I know in Miami, a
Sir,
lot of
most Jamaicans think Florida is Miami and Fort Lauderdale alone.
that is true. But I
Yeah.
know most people,
Isn't Tampa where all the alligators live?
yes, Florida is where you have all of the alligators.
Mention the
Tampa,
alligator, them will identify Tampa. And Louisiana. De Soto.
and there's a lot, the Key West is right here. So, you know, on the Keys, a lot of people live on the Keys. It is not far from Havana, if you look at it, not far. And the Bahamas is right here. Cuba is here and Jamaica is below. So we have an idea of the geography or where Cuba is located. Just like how Florida has its keys and the Bahamian Islands have their little small islands, Cuba also has their little small islands here. So not everybody live on mainland Cuba, but some people actually live on these little islands. The same for the islands, these smaller islands at the north of Cuba, right? This is the largest of it. It's called Pines, Isles of Pines here. And it's a lot of people live on this island. I think we would have stayed here when we went. No, we stayed in Havana, not this side. We stayed in Havana. Cuba is a pretty big place. Um, Very, very big. I we just stayed in Havana, and Havana was, we felt as if we were traveling all over Jamaica, and we haven't gone down this side. So this area right here, Santiago de Cuba, is the closest point to Jamaica and has a very close relationship with Jamaica. This city in Cuba, and Guantanamo Bay, which is here in Guantanamo Bay, the United States still occupy that area in Cuba. Now we're going to look at, the first thing is that the Cubans had been under Spanish rule since Columbus' arrival in 1492. So ever since they have been under the control of the Spanish, while other islands like Jamaica would have changed hands from Spanish to British, or Haiti would have changed hands from the Spanish to the French to the blacks, or Trinidad would have changed hands from Spanish to British, or Grenada from French to English or British. One thing with the Cubans, they have consistently remained under the hands of Spain. And so, and so, because they have consistently remained under the hands of Spain, you will see that the Spanish had quite a lot of control over the Cubans. So the people of Cubans for sure wanted their independence from Spain. In other words, what do we mean by independence? They wanted their independence. What do we mean by the word
Freedom.
freedom? But freedom from what?
They
Their
want
colonial masters.
Repeat.
Freedom from their colonial masters.
Freedom from their colonial
they
master.
wanted to make their own decisions and that kind of stuff.
Yes, they wanted to make their own decisions. But when you hear somebody say that a country wants their independence, all the answers that you have given is correct. But what specifically do they want?
They want
They
to
want
govern
their own
themselves.
government.
Go ahead for me, Austin.
Sarah was saying that they wanted to govern themselves.
Yes. So that is what I was looking for. Yes, they wanted to govern themselves. They didn't want the they didn't want the Spanish to make any rules for them. They wanted to make their own rules, their own laws. They wanted their own flags. They wanted their own leaders. They wanted control of themselves. They didn't want to be governed by Spain, right? So that is independence. Independence is different from emancipation. A lot of Jamaicans do not know the difference. Emancipation is freedom. When we celebrate emancipation, we're celebrating freedom from slavery. But independence, we are celebrating our freedom from colonial rule. Britain, the Cubans would celebrate their independence in celebration from their colonial rule from Spain. But one of the earliest signs that we know that there was problems with the Cubans, and these are white Cubans, Cubans who would have owned slaves. They were they were elites. They owned quite a lot of plantation. They had money, right? And these Cubans, from as early as the 1840s, they started to question their colonial status. They asked themselves, why do we have to be governed by Spain? Why is it that Spain is making all the rules for us? Why we can't make our own decision? And so in the 1840s, they said that, listen, we want to be annexed to the United States. They wanted to be a part of the United States because in the 1800s, the US would have been, at this time, they would have, they were expanding. And so the planters said, we don't want to be governed by Spain. We want it to be governed by the US. Why they wanted to be governed by the US? One, at this point in the 1840s, there was a strong trading relationship between the US and Cuba. Many Cubans would have traveled to the US for business and vacation. Many Cubans also sent their children to school in the US. And the Cubans admired the US system of governance or government. They admired the idea of having a president. They admired the fact that they could vote. They admired the fact that each different state had their different rules. And so they just admired the US system of government and they wanted to be a part of the United States. In fact, the US would have made several offers, almost 4 offers, to purchase Cuba from Spain. So not only the Cubans wanted to be a part of the US, but also the US wanted Cuba. They wanted Cuba. They wanted Cuba to be part of them because if we look at this, they would have purchased Florida in 1818. And so they wanted this. Maybe after they take Cuba, they said, give us Jamaica. Had history gone that way, maybe all of us would have been American citizens. However, at this point, Cuba was very, very, very important to the United States because of their geography, right? Or their closeness to the US. And so we know for sure, mark the timeline, because Cuban history or studying US in the Caribbean is very important. This is where dates comes in quite a lot. And you have to remember some of these dates, right? So we know for sure early on, from as early as the 1840s, one, some Cubans wanted to be annexed to the US, especially the elites. Why? Because of they had strong trading relationship, they had business, some of their children went to school, they admired the American system of government, and also the Americans expressed interest in Cuba. They wanted to purchase Cuba from Spain. And so this brings us to this year in 1852. This is 54, but yes, in 1854, US President Franklin Pierce raised the issue to purchase Cuba, and they wanted to purchase Cuba for 130 million US dollars. So they offered to purchase Cuba for 130 million US dollar. In fact, they would have offered to purchase Cuba between 4 to 5 times That is how they really wanted Cuba, the United States. And within the same year, the US ambassador, so you know, as countries, once you're an independent country, you're going to send your ambassadors to different parts of the world to represent your interests. You go to represent the country. So the US ambassador to Spain, France, and England met in Ostend, Belgium. So they met in Belgium for a meeting. At the meeting, the US said to everybody, Spain, France, England, Europe, you listen to me. We, the United States, we are interested in purchasing Cuba. This was known as the Ostend manifesto, where the United States offered to purchase Cuba, but Spain said no. The US is going to say to the Cubans, somebody, could you read this for me, please? This is what the US is saying to Spain. Let us hear what they are saying to Spain.
If Spain refused to sell Cuba, then by every law, human and the divine, we shall be justified in wresting Cuba from Spain.
Yes. So at the end of the meeting, this was a statement that the United States made. They said, thank you very much, Austin. They said, if Spain refused to sell Cuba, then by every law, human and divine, meaning that whether if they're going to use human law or God law to justify taking Cuba from Spain. Very strong words. When you hear the word divine, which one of the policies comes to mind? Divine, which one of the ideologies?
Manifest destiny.
Very good, the manifest destiny. Divine, because they said in the manifest destiny that God has given them the power, the right to control the Americas. That is why today in Jamaica, our Prime Minister can't tell the United States, in fact, no government at all in Jamaica can't tell the United States, no. If the US says so it must go, that is how it must go. A failure to do that, you're committing a sin against the United States. Really admire the United States in how they would have been 13 colonies, emerge victorious, expand, and continue to expand. That's what you call ambition. Right? You don't stay with the 13, you expand. And you're going to the Caribbean, you say, we want this place. Expansion. Ambition. Very good. And so, we know for sure that they would have refused, Spain would have refused. The Cuban elites continued, and they said that, listen, we are going to advocate for our own independence. We no longer want to be governed by the US. We want to govern ourselves. And so they formed a party, which was called the Reformist Party. They wanted to reform or made a lot of changes in Cuba, right? They also wanted representation in the Spanish Parliament. They wanted to increase the number of white immigrants in Cuba. These were some of the things that the elites wanted, those who were advocating for independence from Spain. They also started a newspaper, and the newspaper would publish their ideas that, listen, Spain should give us representation in the parliament. Spain should allow us the right to, yeah, go ahead. Spain should give us the right to petition. So if we have any problem in Cuba, then we should have the right to petition the Spanish government and say, these are the problems that we're having. And also, during this time, the planters in Cuba face significant decline in their production. But with all the begging, with all the formation of political party, newspaper, begging the Spanish to change how they govern Cuba, they refused. Spain refused to reform Cuba. And so on October the 10th, 1868, the Cubans are going to form a group that is called Creator de Yara, which is a separatist group, and they are going to declare Cuba independence. So they form a group and they call themselves the separatist group, and they said, listen, Cuba is now independent from Spain on October the 10th, 1868. There's also another planter by the name of Carlos Manuel de Espuedes. He freed his slaves and he declared war on Cuba. So you had two groups in Cuba now fighting. Cubans who were the separatists, because separatists mean they want to separate themselves from Spain, and the Spanish who were there who said, no, we should still remain under Spain. And so for 10 years, the Cubans, the separatists, and the Spanish, they are going to fight for 10 years. They are going to fight. So you're going to have a war for 10 years where they are going to fight for their independence. Carlos Manuel de Espuedos, his slaves also was on his side. And his enslaved people were also fighting with the separatist group to free Cuba from Spanish rule. At the end of the day, on February 11th, 1878, 10 years after, the Cubans, who were the separatists, realized that they could not win the war. They couldn't win the war. And so they signed a treaty that is called the Treaty of Zangon. Spain and the separatist group signed that treaty. The treaty stated that they are going to end the war, there's going to be peace, and all the enslaved people that fought, because some enslaved people fought for the side of the Spanish, some fought on the side of the separatist group. And so both of them decided that, listen, we are going to free all the enslaved people who would have decided to fight on either side of the battle. Those who didn't fight continue to remain in slavery. some Cubans decide that they are not going to live under Spanish rule, and so they went to the United States. And so this is what we know as the 10 Years' War. This is the first war that the Cubans had for their independence, and they would have lost that war. After the 10 Years' War, Spain said, all right, we realize that one of the issues that you had before the war was decline in your production. Yeah, decline in your production. And so Spain is going to sign a treaty with the United States. And the treaty is called the Foster Canovas Agreement, 1891. It was a special trade treaty between Cuba and Spain. Sorry, Cuba and the United States. Cuban planters benefited from this treaty because their production would have increased. A lot of Americans invested in their production. Production in terms of sugar increase, export increase, tobacco, all of these different stuff. But out of the blues, in 1894, the US said that, listen, we are no longer going to have this special trade agreement. Anybody decide why the US would have canceled the trade agreement? Why do you think the US would have canceled the trade agreement with Cuba? Why the US would have canceled the trade agreement?
Sir, because they had to pay money.
They had to, who had to pay money? The Cubans?
No, sir, the United States.
The United States? One, it was a special agreement where taxes were lowered. So between Cuba and the US, they had very low taxes. So it was beneficial, special. Americans started to invest in Cuba. This was benefiting the US. It was also benefiting Cuba. But out of the blues, the US decided that they are going to recline this agreement. Why? Why do you think that they would recline it? If both are benefiting, why recline it? It's a question that you should answer. Next, once the US declined that special trade agreement, Spain is going to do the same, and the Cubans are going to say, even if the US cancel the agreement, allow the US to still have some form of privilege in our market. But at the end of the day, Spain didn't listen. Another issue that the Cubans had was that, one, they didn't like the fact that the trade agreement came to an end with the US. Two, at this time, they were receiving a lot of competition from beet sugar. Beet sugar is a different type of sugar, not different from cane sugar. A lot of Cuban banks collapsed, business closed in Cuba, unemployment increased, overcrowded cities, prostitution. Cuba was in a state of disrepair. And so at this point, they are going to declare war on Spain again. So one, between 1868 and 78, you had the 10 Years' War. And then in 1895, they are going to declare another war on Spain for their independence. So they declare war on Spain for their independence a second time. They want, so one, they wanted their freedom, they wanted change in Cuba, but once the Cubans declared their war on Spain, the Americans said, like, listen, we are neutral. We are not going to be a part of this war. Okay? So that is what the US would have said first. They are not getting involved.
Sir, them never know that.
Hmm?
Sarah was saying them never know that. So
Who?
the US, sir, them can't just say we are not going to be a part of the war. Them never know that. So
Well, to me, it seems as if it is the US who would have instigated it. Because if everything is going good for you with this treaty right here, the Foster Canavas Agreement, once both sides are benefiting and then you recline that special trade treaty agreement, which brings me to the question of why. Somewhere down the line, it seems as if it is the US would have reclined it to increase the pressure on Spain. And so immediately after they reclined the agreement, so the agreement was reclined in 1894. By 1895, the Cubans declared war on Spain again for a second time, saying that they wanted their independence.
Sir, would the reason why they stopped? Sir, can you go back to the slide with the question? Yes, sir. I think one reason why the US stopped didn't agree with the agreement anymore, sir, was because of Spain. So because they wanted to, sir, they wanted to buy Cuba, and because Spain was still kind of linked to Cuba in some way, sir. So they were saying that if them stop trading with them, maybe them going to fall out.
That is, so that, and I agree with you. I agree with you. So, in fact, Spain at this time, if Spain still is there and Spain still control over there, then the US would not able to expand or take control of it, and they wanted Cuba. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why they would have canceled the agreement. But no, remember, once the Cuban declared war on Spain for a second time, the Americans said that they are not getting involved in the war. Lie. Lie. And so, if we look at this, the US, while the war was going on between Cubans and Spain, the second war, and this war is called the Cuban War for Independence. So the 10 Years' War was a war for independence, but it is called the 10 Years' War. The second war is called the Cuban War for Independence. Both wars are for their independence. If you understand what I'm saying. So they are fighting two separate times for the same cause. Now, one, many Cubans said that they were sympathetic towards the Cubans' cause. Because look what Spain is doing to them in Cuba. We are so close to Cuba, and the US media start to publish a lot of things about Spain, and that Spain is not governing Cuba correct, and they should give Cubans the right to rule themselves. And some of the Americans said, listen, but not only that, we have a lot of money in Cuba. We have a right in this war. One, we have a lot of sugar, rice plantation. We invest in railroads. We have iron mines. We have a lot of things in Cuba. So we can't just sit down and say that we are not getting involved. The American president said, no, we are not getting involved in this war between Cuban and the Spanish or Spain. But the Americans are saying, listen, you need to get involved, because if our money is there, we own a lot of things in Cuba. They are very close to us. The Cubans, the Spanish is treating the Cubans badly. And so what is happening here is that, but before I ask the question, before I go to that, who do you think is fueling this level of discourse in the US while the war was going on? Who you think?
Who was saying that they must
Yes.
intervene, sir?
We know for sure that Americans are doing it. Americans are saying that the US government should get involved in the war. We know that for sure. But who is behind it?
The people.
Which people? Go ahead, Family Lawrence.
The investors.
The investors are behind it, yes, but somebody is still pushing the investors button and tell them that you can't just sit down there and just say, we are not going to get involved in the war. Somebody is pushing the investors button and say, talk up, push the government to fight for us.
So the person that had the idea of the manifesto, sir.
You think that maybe they were part of it, but there's a group that was there who would have left before.
I don't know. Tell us, sir. Tell us the group, sir.
After the 10 Years' War, some Cubans went to the US.
Oh, so then.
And these Cubans were the ones who were employed in the media, the newspaper, and they were behind. They were the ones who were behind the back, or they were behind trying to push for the Americans to get involved in the war. They were the ones who returned to Cuba and also declare a second war on the Spanish. So all that is going on here, the pushing, where am I? Where this side. All of this, the persons who are telling the investors that, listen, you can't just sit that Cubans are, who would have migrated from that war, went to exile from the first war. They were the ones who are saying, you can't just sit down there. And they were the ones who were employed in the media. And so this is one of the things that they would have drawn. They draw a flag right here, Cuban flag. They used to publish all of these different stuff with a pot. Fire is taking place in Cuba. Cuba is under Anarchy
Anarchy.
under Spanish rule. Serious problem. Fire. You could cook, fry an egg with everything, bake a chicken, everything with what is going on. And so the only way that Cuba could be free from this anarchy and all the problems is for them to get their independence. All right? And so the next thing here is that the newspapers are going to publish headlines, which we call yellow journalism, which played on the arrow in Cuba. So everything bad that was going on in Cuba, even some things that were not true, they are going to publicize it. And so they are publicizing it, and they are saying, listen, it is time for the Americans to help the Cubans to be free from Spanish rule. And so they are publishing in the newspaper. Somebody, could you read this for me, please, if you can see it? This is one article that was published.
How long are the Spaniards to drench Cuba with the blood and tears of her people? How long is the peasant of Spain to be drafted away to Cuba to die miserably in a hopeless war, that Spanish nobles and Spanish officers may get medals and honors?
Very good. And so if you look at it, these are some of the statements that are being published in the newspaper. That things in Cuba is terrible. Yellow journalism, sensationalism. Every single day you see a headline. Cubans are dying. Spain is not ruling Cuba properly. All of these different stuff. And so at this point, the US is going to send a ship to protect American life and property. This ship was called the USS Maine. And out of the blues, yes, out of the blues, the ship exploded and sank. The Americans said 260 persons died. Americans blamed Spain. Spain said, me? I didn't bomb any ship. The Americans said, yes, you did.
Sir, it's a long time. Fake news was going around, man.
Long time. And so if you look at it, the USS Maine was sunk, or it exploded on February 15, 1898. And during this time, the Americans said,
You do that to
Spanish,
us,
the Spain, you would have destroyed our ship. You killed 260 men on our ship. So what do you think the Americans going to do now?
Mash them up.
Yes, they are going to mash them up. They are going to enter the Cuban War for Independence. And they are going to change the name of the war. Once they enter the war, they are changing the name to the Spanish-American War, which lasted for 4 months. So 4 months after they bombed the Spanish said that they didn't bomb the ship. The Americans said the Spanish bombed the ship. People said nobody was on the ship. It was a lie the Americans were telling at this time. But at the end of the day, we know that something happened. And so this question I wanted to ask, who sank the Maine, the USS Maine? The US pointed finger at Spain, and Spain pointed finger back at the US. Who would you believe, the Spanish government or the American newspaper? At the end of the day,
Spanish.
right now, who do you believe?
None of
Sir,
them.
Spanish.
Sir, I
US
think
love tell too
None of
much
them.
lie.
I think
Sir,
it's the
none
US
of
that
them.
was
Sir, them
inside.
blame everything for some. Where who sank the ship?
It
Yes.
Oh,
was
the
the US.
US.
It was the US because
The
if you
US.
the US they don't ram to kill people in an effort to make other people look bad.
And then blame other people when them do it.
Something
Yes,
good
I think
happens,
it is
then just
because
blame
they
them
wanted
for the
no
name
because
and
listen, they
Spain.
wanted a reason to fight Spain for Cuba, and
Yeah.
what reason would it be than to sink a US ship? That gave them the means. So if you sink my ship, we can fight it. If we fight him, say,
Exactly.
give
Sir,
me
them scapegoat, them sink them ownership to make it look
right.
like it's
Something
somebody else do it.
function. Them
260 people
purpose.
dead just because you want to fight. Mighty
Them
God.
ego big enough, so them I gotta do whatever it takes.
Very good. And
Wait, now
so,
suppose nobody was on the ship.
Them would
Suppose
still
nobody was on.
sink it same way.
I believe nobody was on the ship.
Same, sir. Same.
Nobody was on the ship because up to now we don't know the 260 persons who died.
Exactly, sir. Somebody would have at least know one person.
Right. Then could I say,
Yes.
oh, so and so did the ship at so and so.
Who would
Them
have know at least one person? Cause all planes that sink and whatever, somebody knows somebody on it. Titanic. So me
right.
not understand.
All right, very good. So if we know, and so we've seen now in the US newspaper, they are now saying that, listen, this is terrible and no time has expired. Just give me 2 more minutes. We know time has not time has expired. We know for sure that the Spanish sank the ship. That is what they are saying in the US newspaper. And so they are going to declare war on Spain because they said, listen, 260 Americans died. We're going to defend Americans. We're not going to defend Cuban. We're defending Americans. You believe that? They are defending America or they're defending Cubans, or they are just defending their interests in Cuba.
Yes, sir. They're defending. Yes, yes, because they know that if they protect it, they can get it because Spain would have disappeared that moment.
All right.
So they were people, sir. They were protecting what they were
Their
going to get.
interests in Cuba. And so, ladies, if we look right here, the war ended, right? And at the end of the war didn't start in Spain, in Cuba. Look how far they gone and started the war in the Philippines. So, in December 1898, the US and Spain signed the Treaty of Paris, which ended the war. At the end of the war, Cuba gained their independence and they would have received Puerto Rico. They also, this is the US now, they received Puerto Rico, which was a Spanish colony. The Philippines and the Pacific islands of Guam and Wake. So at the end of the war, the Spanish-American War, they signed a treaty. Cuba gained their independence. Puerto Rico came under the control of the US. The Philippines came under the control of the US, and also the Pacific islands of Guam. Now, 400 Americans, they said, died in the war. But at the end of the day, Cubans gained their independence with the help of the United States. Now, when we return tomorrow, we are going to look at how America is going to govern the US. Because right now, the Cubans get their independence, so-called independence. So we're going to see how the US now is going to govern them. Ladies, I've already posted the slide in the Google Classroom. Just ensure that you read this slide before you come to class tomorrow.
Sir,
Go ahead for me.
Sir Bartley won't be present tomorrow. I'm going to school.
All right, but ensure you read the slides still.
Okay, sir, no problem.
All right. Enjoy the rest of the day, ladies.
Yes, sir.
Bye, sir.
Bye.
Bye bye.